Financial reporting through the lens of a property casualty actuary. Part 6, differences from statutory to other financial regulatory reporting frameworks in the U.S. Chapter 25, Solvency II. Solvency II is a principle-based insurance regulatory system governing how insurance companies are funded in the European Union. It links the required capital of insurance companies to their risk profile. Solvency II came into effect on January 1, 2016. The new system is based on 3 pillars similar to those of Basel II. Those pillars are quantification, governance, and transparency. Pillar 1. Quantitative capital requirements. Pillar 1 is focused on the quantitative aspect of Solvency II to obtain the Solvency Capital Requirement, SCR, and Minimum Capital Requirement, MCR. It also harmonized standards for the valuation of assets and liabilities. The measurement approach is summarized in the following diagram and is often referred to as the total balance sheet approach. On the asset side of the balance sheet, non-insurance assets are recorded using the measurement approach under International Financial Reporting Standards, or IFRS. Reinsurance assets are measured in the same way as insurance liabilities. On the liability side of the balance sheet, the technical provisions consist of the discounted best estimate of the liabilities and their associated risk margin. These are meant to represent the fair market value of the insurance liabilities, and although principles-based, the approach to calculating them is fairly prescriptive. The best estimate of the liabilities is the expected value of the cash flows discounted using a risk-free rate. Adjustments such as matching adjustment for illiquidity are available for long-term liabilities. The risk-free discount rates are published by the European regulator on a monthly basis. The risk margin is calculated using a cost of capital method with the cost of capital above the risk-free rate, R minus I from Chapter 23, equal to 6%. Under Pillar 1, there are 2 capital requirements defined, which are the Solvency Capital Requirement, SCR, and Minimum Capital Requirement, MCR. The SCR and MCR are capital requirements that must be held in addition to the best estimate liabilities. SCR is the capital that should be held to ensure that the insurance company can meet its obligations to policyholders and beneficiaries with certain probability and should be set to a confidence level of 99.5% over a 12-month period. A 1-year 99.5% value at risk, or VAR. A company whose capital falls below the SCR will be subject to regulatory intervention. If it falls even further below the MCR, the company will lose its license and will not be permitted to operate. Critics have noted that the 1-year 99.5 VAR is not an adequate measure for bearing the risk to ultimate settlement. Solvency II requires consideration of recapitalization based on adverse development in each future annual period, yet doesn't assume you need to hold sufficient capital from inception to settlement without raising capital. Therefore, critics of Solvency II believe using 1-year 99.5% VAR as the capital standard in the risk margin calculation does not provide a true fair market value. The SCR can be calculated using the standard model, an approved internal model, or a mix of both. To obtain approval for an internal model, the company has to demonstrate that the model is used in running the business, has been validated by an independent third party, and is documented appropriately. The benefits of using an internal model are a model which is more appropriately tailored to the risk profile of the insurance company and the likely outcome of a lower SCR. Any remaining amount between the assets minus the technical provisions and SCR is considered free surplus. Pillar 2, Supervisory Activities. Pillar 2 provides insurance supervisors with the tools required to identify high-risk companies and the power to intervene. First, this pillar requires companies to have the governance structure in place to address the following key areas: conditions, including fitness and propriety, outsourcing, and internal control, and functions, internal audit function, actuarial function, risk management function, compliance function. The functional areas, while each satisfying the conditions, should be allocated responsibility in a manner that avoids duplication. Each one is viewed as essential for an insurance business to operate effectively. Key responsibilities of each function include internal audit, produce a report at least annually to the board of directors on any deficiencies of the internal controls and any shortcomings in compliance with internal policies and procedures. This function should have unrestricted access to information and staff. Actuarial. Ensure the reasonability of methods and assumptions used in calculating the technical provisions and providing a look-back analysis of best estimates against experience. Also, provide opinions on the overall underwriting policy and adequacy of reinsurance arrangements. Risk management. Monitoring the risk management function and maintaining an aggregated view. Ensure the integration of any internal model with the risk management function. Compliance. Ensure the internal control system is effective to comply with all applicable laws and regulation, promptly reporting any major compliance issues to the board of directors. Pillar 2 also requires that companies complete an own risk self-assessment, or ORSA. The ORSA has been defined by the European Insurance and Occupational Pensions Authority, EIOPA, as the entirety of the processes and procedures employed to identify, assess, monitor, manage, and report the short and long-term risks a insurance or reinsurance undertaking faces or may face, and to determine the own funds necessary to ensure that the undertaking's overall solvency needs are met at all times. An ORSA should contain, at a minimum, the following: the overall solvency needs, taking into account the specific risk profile, approved risk tolerance limits, and the business strategy of the undertaking. The compliance with the capital requirements, and the requirements regarding technical provisions. The extent to which the risk profile of the undertaking deviates significantly from the assumptions underlying the SCR, calculated with the standard formula or with its partial or full internal model. The ORSA results will periodically be reported to the supervisor, who will use the results as input for their risk-based supervision and actions. The ORSA will also be the basis for the dialogue between the insurer and the supervisor regarding important decisions made by the insurer. In the case of significant deviations from the risk profile, the ORSA will be the starting point of the supervisor's process that could lead to a capital add-on, i.e., an increase in the SCR. Pillar 3. Transparency. Pillar 3 represents the disclosure and reporting of information about a company's capital and regulatory position collected from Pillars 1 and 2 to the supervisors and the financial markets. Some items will be reported quarterly and others annually. The purpose of public disclosure of a company's financial and solvency position is to increase market discipline, because companies are aware that their risk-based decisions will be in the public and supervisory domains. Comparison to the U.S. solvency regime. Solvency II was developed as a group-wide solvency regime. The U.S. regime, being state-based, is focused on the regulation of individual statutory entities, with capital walled off from other entities in the group. However, pressure stemming from the financial crisis in 2008, combined with closer coordination between international insurance regulators, led to the NAIC's Solvency Modernization Initiative, SMI. The SMI developed a, quote, windows and walls approach, giving windows for state insurance regulators to look into group-wide operations and the effect those operations might have on a statutory entity, while maintaining the walls at the statutory legal entity level. Those windows that developed out of SMI were 1. Communication between regulators, enhanced communications between the state insurance regulators within the group. 2. Supervisory colleges, formally incorporate supervisory colleges of international regulators into the NAIC review procedures. 3. Access to and collection of information, enhanced access to upstream entities within a group structure including regulated and non-regulated entities. 4. Enforcement measures, tools to protect policyholders if violations occur. 5. Group capital assessments. Group supervision requires a panoramic view of capital needs of the group to be effective. Accreditation. State insurance regulators involved in group supervision should be accredited through the NAIC. The regulatory tool developed to implement several of these windows was the U.S. Own Risk and Solvency Assessment, or ORSA, requirement. The NAIC defines the ORSA as an internal assessment conducted by the insurer of the material and relevant risks identified by the insurer associated with an insurer's current business plan and the sufficiency of capital resources to support those risks. The NAIC has stipulated two primary goals for the ORSA. 1. To foster an effective level of enterprise risk management, ERM, at all insurance companies, through which each insurance company identifies, assesses, monitors, prioritizes, and reports on its material and relevant risks, using techniques that are appropriate to the nature, scale, and complexity of the insurer's risks, in a manner that is adequate to support risk and capital decisions. 2. To provide a group-level perspective on risk and capital as a supplement to the existing legal entity view. In order to meet these goals, an insurer that is a member of an insurance holding company system, as defined by state insurance law, and meets certain benchmarks for direct written and unaffiliated assumed premium, is required to complete the ORSA process at least annually and create an ORSA summary report to be provided to its lead state commissioner and, upon request, to its domiciliary state commissioner. Additionally, the insurer must retain documentation and supporting risk management material to evidence the efficacy of its ORSA process, as these may be requested for review by the insurance state commissioners. The ORSA process is intended to be just one element of an insurer's overall ERM framework, in which the insurer assesses and summarizes the other elements of the framework, as well as linking these to the insurer's overall organizational structure, business strategy, and capital management planning process. Accordingly, the NAIC expects that the depth and detail of the ORSA and the ORSA summary report should reflect the nature of the size and complexity of insurer and its ERM framework. To assist state commissioners in gaining a high-level understanding of an insurer's ORSA, the NAIC has established three key areas that the ORSA summary report should cover. Section 1. Description of the insurer's risk management framework. This section provides a summary of the insurer's ERM framework, covering how the insurer has integrated the following key principles into the organization: risk culture and governance, risk identification and prioritization process, risk appetite and tolerances or limits, risk management and controls, and risk reporting and communication. In summary, it brings together how the insurer identifies and categorizes its material risks and how it assesses, monitors, and manages those risks against its established risk tolerances as it executes its business strategy. Section 2. Insurer's assessment of risk exposure. This section provides a high-level summary of the current quantitative and/or qualitative assessments of the insurer's risk exposure in both normal and stressed environments for each material risk category identified in Section 1. In addition to providing detailed descriptions and explanations of the risks identified by the insurer describes the assessment methodology used and key assumptions made to evaluate the current risk level, and how this compares to the relevant risk tolerances or limits for the risk under both normal and stressed conditions. For P&C insurers, relevant material risk categories typically include insurance risk, often divided into underwriting or premium risk, reserve risk, and catastrophe risk, market risk, credit risk, liquidity risk, operational risk, and strategic risk. Section 3. Group assessment of risk capital and prospective solvency assessment. This section provides a summary of the insurer's process for assessing capital adequacy in relation to its risk profile, and how this process is integrated into the insurer's management and decision-making culture. For the group assessment of risk capital, the insurer describes its approach for assessing its group capital adequacy, including the basis of its definition of solvency, accounting or valuation basis, and the key methodologies, assumptions, and considerations used in calculating available capital and risk capital required. For the prospective solvency assessment, the insurer projects its future financial position, including its projected economic and regulatory capital, to assess its ability to meet its internally defined risk appetite and its regulatory capital requirements based on the insurer's multi-year, typically 3 to 5 years, business plan. The prospective solvency assessment is also completed under both normal and stressed environments. Further detail on the requirements for completing an ORSA process and the details that are expected to be covered within each section of an insurer's ORSA summary report can be found in the NAIC's Own Risk and Solvency Assessment, or ORSA, Guidance Manual. Depending on their role within an insurer, actuaries may become involved in the ORSA process in several ways. Due to the significant role they play in establishing and executing the insurer's ERM framework and policies, identifying and monitoring its key risks, and assisting senior leadership in overall risk and capital management, an actuary that serves as the insurer's chief risk officer, and actuaries that are members of its ERM function typically have ownership of the overall drafting of the ORSA summary report, particularly where these elements are covered within Section 1. Additionally, actuaries within the ERM function are frequently involved with the estimation and monitoring of the insurer's risk exposure in relation to its risk tolerances for the material risks identified in Section 2, as well as the modeling of the group's risk capital adequacy and prospective solvency assessment detailed in Section 3. Actuaries working within an insurer's pricing or reserving functions assist the ERM team in the risk identification and assessment or estimation process for the insurer's material insurance risks, and may contribute to drafting sections of the ORSA summary report related to their risk area. The models utilized by the insurer to estimate its material risk exposures, group risk capital, and prospective solvency position are typically validated by another qualified actuary that was not involved in their development, which sometimes results in the involvement of a third-party actuarial consulting firm. Finally, actuaries assisting in the regulatory examination and financial analysis review of an insurance company may review the ORSA summary report to better understand the material risks the insurer is facing, its current and projected capital adequacy, and the strength of the insurer's risk management program.